tanto para quem está aqui na sala, presencialmente, para quem está acompanhando no YouTube. Desculpem o pequeno atraso devido às questões técnicas, já foram sanadas, solucionadas, e eu sou o Fabiano e, junto com o Luiz Augusto, coordeno o ciclo de palestras do IESP para esse ano de 2026. É uma grande satisfação abrir o ciclo nesse primeiro semestre, como sempre, bastante rico, com bastante variedade. A gente conseguiu agendar com colegas do Brasil, de fora do Brasil, do Rio, fora do Rio. Vamos ter uma palestra online da Alice Chu, no dia 13 de abril. Já na sexta-feira agora temos o primeiro seminário. Nós também fazemos isso, né? Inserimos seminários de laboratórios no ciclo. E na sexta-feira teremos o seminário do OIMC. Então já temos aqui já uma atividade intensa. O inaugural foi na sexta-feira, no excelente aula do Catherine Seking. E hoje temos um prazer muito grande de receber o Ettore Recchi, da ScPo. Vai fazer a primeira palestra do ciclo, fora da aula inaugural, Global International Mobility Ginis. Mais sobre isso, o Carlos Antônio vai falar, o Carlos Antônio vai apresentar o professor Ettore, e minha função aqui é dar início ao nosso ciclo. Então, muito obrigado, professor Ettore, e vamos ao trabalho, não é isso? É melhor porque aí o robozinho pega a gente.
Bom, eu vou falar rapidamente, porque já perdemos algum tempo aqui na organização tecnológica da palestra. Queria apenas dizer que o professor Ettore Recchi, enfim, como disse Fabiano, professor de Sociologia na ScPo, fez pesquisa sobre diversos temas, mas com bastante mais intensidade sobre migração internacional, né? E também desigualdade, né? É um pesquisador reconhecido não só na Europa, mas em outras partes do mundo, na área de estratificação social. Ele também integra o Centro para o Estudo das Desigualdades Sociais, Centre Recherches sur Inequality Sociale, né? É o CRIS da ScPo. E, enfim, ele vai falar aqui para a gente. E também gostaria de dizer que ele já visitou o IESP várias vezes. Se não me engano, essa é a terceira vez que você visita o IESP. Já passou, então ele já é um amigo da casa de longa data. Tá? Muito bem-vindo, Ettore.
Gosto muito de estar aqui. Muito obrigado de sua apresentação, Carlos, de essa invitação. Sim, já foi no IESP há muito ano. Adalberto Cardoso, que está aqui, me invitou há 10 anos. Sim. Now I'm going to switch to English. I'm very sorry, my Portuguese is so bad. But I'm willing to learn and improve, and maybe one day my dream will come true of presenting at YES in Portuguese. I'll work on it. So actually today I'm presenting a much more advanced version of something that I was only envisioning during my first presentation about 10 years ago in YES. And it's work that comes from a research program on the global movement of people, which I've set up, not at ScPo actually, but at my secondary affiliation, which is the European University Institute. I'm part-time professor there. It's a graduate institute only for PhD students in Florence, Italy, funded by the European Union. And this research program we call the Global Mobilities Program. I'm working there with colleagues and collaborators, Tobias Grohmann, Luca Bernasconi, Emmanuel Deutschmann, and Andrew Favell, whom I want to acknowledge, are part of the authors of a paper that I circulated, which has been recently submitted to a journal. But I'm going to start from something a bit anecdotal and biographical. In 2018, I just started this research program, and I went on vacation to Cuba. And it was an extremely hot day, and I sat on a cafe, let's call it a cafe, and the waiter was very talkative. And he sat with me, and we spoke for about half an hour about life in Cuba, life in France, whatever. At some point, there was silence at the end of our conversation, and he broke the silence by saying, ¿Cómo se siente uno a viajar por el mundo? How does it feel to travel the world? He'd never been away from Cuba, as most Cubans of the time. Now things have changed, for worse, I would say. But he really expressed his longing for visiting the world, for being abroad. And he felt this constraint of not having a chance, not having the opportunity to leave his country. So that was a little bit of an epiphany for me, because I had already started this program on global mobility, but I never really thought or felt the importance of the inequality of travel opportunities for people around the world. And I felt that modernity was kind of out of leaving behind some people. Modernity is mobility. That's something that geographers say, and I think sociologists can have a slightly different angle. Yes, modernity is mobility, but why? I have two competing theories, and this is still a little bit of a prologue, then I'll go to empirical data. A possible interpretation is the barrier. Mobility is so important to modernity because mobility is a way out or a way of taming disenchantment, a way of fighting against our lack of certainty and looking for plenitude, looking for an extension of one's life through geography, through the expansions of one's personal geography. I have a literary reference. I really love this novel. I don't know if anybody knows about this lady. She was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature a few years back. Olga Tokarczuk. I really recommend this book, Flights. And there is this quote: standing there on the embankment, staring into the current, I realized that the thing in motion will always be better than a thing at rest. And that which is static will degenerate and decay, turn to ash, while that which is in motion is able to last for all eternity. So fighting, trying to find eternity through mobility. In the same book, there is another quote that speaks to another possible interpretation of why mobility is so central to modernity. And it's a Marxian take. It's not a Weberian take. We are in an age of alienation, and travel offers a way out, a way to escape alienation. Whoever travels without arriving, whoever wanders without settling, escapes the system. Movement is a form of resistance. I'm not able to adjudicate between the Weberian reading and the Marxian reading. And also I don't have firm evidence about the subjective importance of traveling for the modern soul. But I have some patchy evidence, just still in the form of an introduction. Travel is a growing part of aspirational identities of people. How do we know? I have two pieces of evidence. Welcome. The first part comes from an unusual source. Where do people reveal their identity and what they want to be? Dating apps. OkCupid is a quite unique dating app not so well known. It's not that famous like, say, Tinder, but it has a peculiarity. And the peculiarity is that this dating app requires people to write a self-presentation. And incidentally, some years ago, at the beginning of their operations, this dating app released a data set of a sample of the users with their self-presentations. And you can get it, you can download it from the internet. It's only people from California, okay, it's 2011, 2012, but still, if you search this self-presentation, you find out, I found out, that in 38% of them, there is the word traveling, travel, or trip. And if you, there is also an educational gradient. As you go up education, because you have also information about their education, this proportion goes up. It's quite a lot, I mean, in a self-presentation. Another piece of evidence. Does anybody know about the Gallup word poll? You know what it is? Yeah. Gallup runs this yearly survey in 150, more or less, countries in the world. And they have, from time to time, not every year, this question. Ideally, if you have the opportunity, would you like to move permanently to another country? Now, this is the answers of different countries. Of course, in low-income countries, there is higher proportion. 50% of people in the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Sierra Leone, they would like to leave the country for good. But that's not the surprise. The surprise is that also in middle upper income countries like Chile, Argentina, or Mexico, there is more than 30% of people who like to leave the country, who want to go out of the country forever. But even in high income countries, France, the UK, Germany, more than 20%, 25% would like to live elsewhere. There is an aspiration to elsewhere, which is quite telling. Outliers, China and India, but that's a separate, that's a footnote. I don't have the time, we can talk about it maybe in the discussion. Still prologue, now to hard facts. How much people move? There is an environmental scholar in Paris from École Polytechnique, Aurélien Bigot, who has searched a lot of different sources and created this marvelous, to me, graph, which tracks the number of kilometers per day of average persons in France from the times of Napoleon. Now, you see that the average Frenchman and French woman for the whole 19th century usually covered about 5 kilometers per day. That's an yearly average. Then things start to change after the First World War, and they go up almost exponentially, for much of the 20th century. Then they kind of level out, but not that much. They keep on increasing until our days. That ends in 2020. Why that? Cars, buses, and then from the 1960s and 70s, commercial flights. And now the average, which is the yearly average, so you should multiply 50 kilometers per day per 365 days, it's 10 times what it was 1 century ago. So this shows that ours is the age of mobility, how mobility is central to modernity in a geographical sense. My interest lies more in international mobility, actually, cross-border mobility. And here we have a similar graph starting from 1960, which tracks the growth of international mobility compared to migration and the growth of the world population. The number of migrants in the world has multiplied by a factor of 3.5 in 60 years. But the number of internationally mobile or international travels has multiplied by a factor of 21. So there is really a proliferation of travel which dwarfs the expansion of migration, which has been magnified in political discourse, but also in academic discourse. You have one of the best-selling books in migration studies, The Age of Migration. No, we are not in the age of migration. We are in the age of mobility. This means more travel for all? No. The answer is no. There is a lot of literature in political science and political theory showing inequalities in mobility rights. Access to passports, access to visas. I work on the cost of visas. The rights of people to get out of the country are highly unequal across regions of the world. But okay, this is an acquis, this is something that we know, but we don't know how much de facto there is inequality in the practice of international mobility of people. And that's where I'm heading with this talk. And this is the structure of the talk. I will speak briefly about the data set because I'm bringing to the table a new data set that was released a couple of weeks ago. It's now deposited on a repository called Zenodo. It's called Global Transnational Mobility Dataset 2.0. And you can download it and play with it. And I have 4 research questions. The first one is very descriptive. How did global mobility volumes develop between 1995 and 2022? What is the relationship between migration and non-migratory international mobility? How does global mobility, how is it structured in network terms across the planet? And fourth and most important, how unequal is the distribution of mobility across the world? So 4 questions, and the 4 sections will be identified on top of my slides. A little bit about the data. I started this project in 2018. In 2019, I released and published also a paper using a preliminary version. We only explore 6 years and only did some marginal, let's say, adjustment to the data. I will not speak about that. There is a slightly similar data set created in 2023 by a bunch of Spanish economists, but they only work on 74 countries, mostly OECD countries and a few other countries, and they don't consider migration. Whereas the Global Transnational Mobility data set that contributed to create estimates human mobility between 243 countries for 27 years and combines migratory and non-migratory mobility. Okay, the basic unit of a data set is cross-border episodes. That is, anytime that a human being goes from country A to country B and crosses a border, okay? So it's not individuals, it's episodes, it's events. Which means that we don't know, we cannot know whether it's the same individuals or it's different individuals. So this is not individual level data. Our cells in the data sets are corridors, that is diets, country A and country B, Brazil and France, Argentina and Botswana, whatever. We cover all possible combinations of countries in terms of corridors. And what we get in any cell is the number of times that a person, a human being, went from country A to country B in any given year. We distinguish between migrants, according to the convention created by the United Nations Population Division, that is, people who stay at destination for more than 12 months and people who stay less. And we use 2 types of data: administrative data and transportation data. In principle, they should give the same numbers, the same figures. Administrative data are usually produced by the country of arrival. When people arrive, people are registered, and countries of arrival have an interest in knowing how many people get in. And they are required by a convention, United Nations Convention, to communicate these numbers in a rather detailed form to the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Transport data are created by the carriers. Unfortunately, these data are very detailed for commercial flights. They're not so detailed for land transportation or for water transportation. That's nice, thank you. The intuition behind the data set is that if we get both type of data, administrative data, transport data, we can compare them and see if they match. We can substitute one for the other and so create a more coherent and more complete picture of the whole mobility landscape. So our basic ingredients come from the United Nations World Tourism Organization, which is an agency of the United Nations that collects detailed administrative data of entries into all UN countries, UN member states. We get data about migration flows from a data set about migration created and kept updated by this statistical demographer, Guy Abel, and he has a very detailed data set. And then we get air passenger data from a private company that sells this information. And fortunately, we got some funding and we bought this data from this company called ScPo. And for years 2010, 2022, and then we backcasted the data for the previous years using gravity models. I will spare you from this workflow how we combine the data. That's too much, but we can discuss it afterwards. And this is the coverage. Basically, the data set includes 1.2 billion cells for the 27 years. And the coverage is 79% of all possible combinations of all possible country diets, country corridors, travel corridors, in both periods. The only difference is that the older period, the earlier period, 1995-2009, as I said, we did backcasting of the flight data because we didn't have the flight data for that period. They don't exist. There are the administrative data, and we compared the administrative data with the flight data for the following period, and we adjusted based on that using gravity model. Usually, most of the cells come from flight data, but the largest corridors are covered by administrative data. So administrative data are better when it comes to large corridors. Flight data are useful when you have small corridors, like, as I said, Argentina to Botswana. Okay, the Botswanian government is not that good at reporting the number of Argentinians coming in. Yes.
How can you be sure you're not double counting people, or I mean, double counting this?
No, we are using either one or the other. We don't put them together. No. We decide whether, if we have both, we decide what we want to use. We have a number of rules to do it. Okay, let's go to the results. So this is the starting descriptive point. How has global transnational mobility evolved over the period? Simple. It has exactly doubled. In 1995, there were 5.3 billion international travel in the world. In 2019, on the eve of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're at 10.6. The COVID pandemic was a major breakdown in the series, but then in 2022, where our series started, we're willing to expand it, but we still don't have it, don't have the data. There was a steep recovery, and I'm pretty sure that we are back on track with the series by now. Second observation, This is divided by colors, and the colors are the different regions of the world. The lion's share of mobility takes place in Europe. Europe is really the magnet of global mobility. Why that?
Also including the travels within Europe.
Exactly.
So it's a lot of...
Exactly. I'll go to these answers to yours. If we divide intra-regional from inter-regional, you see how much a difference. Much of the action takes place within regions. 80% of international travel is within South America, within North America, within Europe, and especially within Europe. Within intra-European travel makes up 60% of the global volume of travel. But then the growth over the period, which is one of the major findings, has not been driven so much by Europe. It has been driven by Asia. This is the blue line. Mobility from Asia has shot up of more than 300% compared to 1995. These are Europe and Oceania and other parts of Asia. South America and North America are here. The increase has been substantial, but not that spectacular. You see, it's about 130%. It's a 30% increase, no more than that. Oh, these words.
Yeah.
Migration versus other types of mobility. Yeah, migratory movements on average make less than 1% of all travel. In Europe, it's less. It's about 1 every 1,000 travel is a newly moving migrant. So on average, you can think that when you jump on an average airplane, I use this kind of image, there is only one migrant on board. All the others are people who are staying 1 weekend, 1 week, 1 month, 6 months, but not staying for longer than 12 months. And this is interesting, I mean, also for its political implications to communicate. What are the densest and what are the densest corridors? The densest corridors, as I said, are in Europe, and particularly in continental Europe, revolving around Germany. This is a little bit of a surprise. We double-checked, triple-checked, but Germany and Austria in 1995, the Netherlands and Germany, the Netherlands and Germany, the Netherlands and Germany, Germany and Austria, Czechia and Austria, even relatively small countries, had incredible flows of people coming and going. This is really a free movement area, which is a feature of the European Union that really affects everyday life of a lot of people. The US and Mexico, that is sometimes used as a sort of icon of huge mobility, is not as large as the mobility between two small countries like Czechia and Austria. And also the border between Hong Kong and China used to be relatively dense in 2005, but it is no longer in the top 10 in the most recent years. And also, it's worth being mentioned that there is 11% of corridors that are practically empty. There are less than 100 travelers per year. And these are improbable combinations like Samoa and Malta, or Cuba and Bhutan. That's a little bit of a fun fact. Okay, then let's look at the big picture in a network form. To do that, we use the community detection algorithm, which is a way of clustering geographical information, comparing actual flows to hypothetical flows between countries. I tell you already, there is not so much change over the 27 years. There's a lot of stability. But some changes, yes, they occur, and some of them also involve Latin America. It's worth being looked at. So in 1995, we have 9 clusters. The South American cluster, the hub Argentina. North American, the hub the US. Western Africa, Eastern Africa, China dominating the Asian network, Middle Eastern, North African cluster, the violet one around Dubai, Central Asia and Russia, and part of Eastern Europe around Turkey, the continental European, Germany, and then the UK and British Islands, and Gibraltar, of course, as the Commonwealth, small Commonwealth cluster. How does it change? 2005, not much changes, not many changes. 2015, if I manage, 2015.
No, 2015, I didn't manage that. Yeah, it's right, no, it's right.
It's okay.
Yeah.
2015, Latin America is not separated from North America. They just form one cluster around the US. You must tell me what happens there. I don't know. I'm just recording what the data show. But there is a merging of these two clusters, meaning that more people travel across the two parts of the continent than they used to be, and are more separated from the rest than they used to be. Also interesting is the fact that the UK cluster disappears in 2015, and it's exactly and is absorbed by the EU continental cluster, and that's exactly on the eve of Brexit. Just as Brexit was a reaction of the UK becoming too close to the rest of Europe. And then the most recent, 2022, the UK is back in the game at the center of a quite unusual cluster, including the Balkans and Greece, and then Malaysia as replaced China, but that's incidental because in 2022 China was still very close because of COVID and the Chinese could not travel abroad. There's a separate Nordic countries in Europe with around Sweden, and Russia has overcome Turkey as the hub of the Central Asia and former USSR countries. So I think already told you about this key aspect of the shifting clusters. I want to go to the last part, and the last part is about the inequality part. For this part, the basic metric is an indicator that we call the outward mobility rate. The outward mobility rate is simply the number of outgoing travel from any country divided by the population size of that country. Okay? And we have a ranking of all countries in the world have a number, which is the number of travel divided by population. On top there is Luxembourg. 13 means that every Luxembourgeois goes abroad 13 times over the year. That's pretty straightforward. Luxembourg is a tiny country, it's a rich country, it's part of the European Union where there is free movement. They go out even for shopping out of the country. On the opposite end, you have North Korea. In North Korea, you have 6 travels abroad for 10,000 people. nobody goes out of North Korea. It's like a sealed off country. And similarly, Congo, there's very few, one person every 1,000 go out of the country, went out of the country in 2022. So already this shows a huge difference between countries, partly explained by geography, partly explained by prosperity, partly explained by politics. But let's go. Oh, I have a digression on Brazil because I have also another question to you. So the outward mobility rate for South American countries, as not all of them are there, but I selected a few. So this is Brazil, okay? It's 0.1, which means that there is one international travel every 10 person per year in Brazil. Is it much? Is it a lot? Or is it few? It's few. It's few. It's small compared, for instance, to Argentina. Argentina, this gray line increases. And Brazil is quite stable. There's a little increase after 2010, but not that much. Argentina has always been higher than Brazil, and it goes up to 5, 0.5, 0.6 in 2017. So there's a huge gulf with Brazil, and also a huge gulf with Peru. And I don't know, I have two hypotheses. One, it's a big country, but also China is a big country, and there's a lot of people that with prosperity have gone out, and let's see that. Second, you speak Portuguese, and you don't have neighboring countries speaking Portuguese. But also the Chinese speak Chinese, and not many people in the world speak Chinese. So I still have a question mark, and maybe in the discussion you can tell me why so much of a difference with Argentina and Peru. These are the average of the outward mobility rates going from 0.22 in 1985 to 0.14 in 2019. This is migratory outward mobility rates, showing that on average, there are 3 migrants every 1,000 residents in the world going out on a yearly basis. Okay. So the intuition is, I think everybody in the room is familiar with Gini coefficient, right? I don't need to explain Gini to this public. Ginis are usually employed by social scientists for income and wealth, but the parameter, the logic of a function is a function that measures all sorts of inequality whenever you have a distribution. And so we can apply it to international mobility as well. And we can rank these outward mobility rates from the lowest to the highest, that is from North Korea to Luxembourg, creating a cumulative curve, which is a Lorentz curve, and you see already that it's a rather unequal, very unequal Lorentz curve. And then it comes the Gini, and we compare the mobility Gini, which I show you in the next slide. This is already the Lorentz curve of a mobility in 2019, but we compare it to the Gini for income, using GDP per capita, and also to another Gini, the Gini for the visas. Do you know the Henley index? It's about the power of passports, and it measures how many countries a passport entitles to visit without a visa. And this company called Henley invented it some years ago, and it's a nice index. It shows the power of passports. So if you have a Japanese passport, you can go to 190 countries without a visa. If you have Singapore, 189, Germany and France 185, and then you have Iraq and Afghanistan, 2 countries, 3 countries, something like that. So it shows the inequality of de jure, of the right of mobility, not de facto mobility. Basically, in the next slide, I do compare the International Mobility Gini, the Income Gini, and the Visa Gini. And this is what comes out of it. These are the Mobility Ginis. There are 3 versions depending on different specification. I can walk you through them if you're interested, but basically the message is the same. They range between 0.8 and 0.87, which is
Very high.
spectacular. Super high.
Yeah.
This is the Income Ginis, much like Branko Milanovic created, and it's between 0.7, 65 and 0.7, it goes down. And these are the Visa Ginis that stop in 2013, and they are between 0.4 and 0.5. Yeah, different versions, because one of the Ginis is the absolute mobility Gini, one is per capita, and one is population weighted, so as to avoid that Luxembourg is as important as China in the calculation. But the message is the same. They are very, very high, and they slightly decline over time, but then during the COVID period, we went even further up. Is Pedro Souza in the room?
No.
No, okay. I read this article that he sent me, and I noticed that he used the growth incidence curve. That it's something that economists use when calculating changes in inequality. That's the famous Milanovic elephant. It's a growth incidence curve. That is, you anchor a distribution to the starting point. In this case, we anchor the distribution of incomes to 1995, and we see how changes in the distribution at the end point, in this case 2019, occur at different levels of the distribution. So just concentrate on the blue line, which is the growth of outward mobility rates at different parts of the income distribution in the world. You see here you have an increase of 300 and 400%, which is pretty high, but then in the middle of a distribution, more or less corresponding to where China is, you have an increase in mobility that is over 2,000%. It's absurd, it's incredible. Again, we triple check that this is how it is. This is the increase of GDP per capita. This is a replica of the elephant, which is an elephant no more. It happened to be an elephant only in a given time frame, but even more recent work by Milanovic have abandoned the image of the elephant. But still, China experienced an incredible increase in income over this quarter of a century of over 500%, but the increase in mobility was even more marked than the increase in income over the period. And here it's an easier to understand, it's a graph that is easier to understand. We simply plot GDP per capita and mobility per capita, or mobility rates, and we create arrows where the base is 1995 and the top is 2019. Again, this is China. The increase in GDP has been symmetrical to the increase in mobility. The GDP went from 2,000 to 10,000. The mobility rate went to below 0.1 to 0.1 to 0.1. So it was an order of magnitude leap in mobility. This is India. And then there are a few countries where the increase in mobility has been higher than the increase in prosperity. This is Argentina. This is Australia. This is Nigeria. And then other countries where, in fact, there was more of an increase in GDP than an increase in mobility. This is the US. And I think that Brazil should be this one, where you have more of an increase in GDP than an increase in mobility. This is the last figure, last slide. This is a little bit esoteric to me, because it's a fixed effect regression, but it's not OLS or logistic regression. It's a recentered inference function regression, which is something that advanced econometrics does these days. Basically, the outcome variable, dependent variable, is the global mobility Gini, which is an aggregate figure. But this type of regressions compute the impact of every unit of an independent variable on the dependent variable, how the independent variable changes the shape of the outcome. I only have the intuition. Don't ask me about the maths. It's the econometrician in my group that did that.
It's a quantile regression.
Yeah, the logic is the same, but it's not a quantile regression.
It's related to it.
It's related. Methodologically similar, conceptually similar to quantile regression. Yeah. Basically, what we wanted to check was whether it is more changes in GDP per capita or changes in the power of passports that affect the gene of mobility. We have different specification here depending on country fit effect or year fixed effect of accumulation of both. What you see from comparing these two in the different specification is that GDP per capita, an increase in GDP per capita tends to reduce significantly the mobility Gini, whereas a change in the power of a passport doesn't. So inequality in mobility seems to be more related to economic development than to political restrictions. Once you empower people with economic prosperity, then you have demand for mobility, which in a sense is more important than government restrictions to mobility. That's our interpretation of these results. So I'm summarizing and concluding. This is really my last slide. We can discuss this.
Can you go back one?
Yeah.
You were saying that among richer countries, the inequality of mobility is lesser, is lower. And among the poorer countries, as you go up in the scale, you reduce the Gini, but reduce the Gini among those who are in the same level of GDP, right? So you are saying that among two poorer countries, there is more inequality in mobility. You can eventually have a very high mobility, mobile country and a very low mobile country. And among richer, probably everyone is very mobile.
Yeah, that's the way you're saying. Yeah. But it changes. But if you look at the paper, there's a separate table which I'm not presenting here, where we experimented on running regression only on the lowest half of the distribution. And actually there, changes in GDP have more of an effect on the Gini, which means that boosting GDP in the lower parts of the distribution you affect, you reduce the Gini more. So that's where the action.
Yeah, I see.
You see?
It totally makes sense with this result.
Yeah. So main takeaways. Global Mobility Ginis are extremely high. The world is very segregated geographically in the capacity of people to move out or not move out of the countries. This is an overlooked dimension of inequality, which is eventually larger than global income Ginis and global Ginis, depending on the power of passports. Second takeaway, there is a tight relationship between economic development and mobility and international mobility, which I read, we may want to discuss it as a generalized appetite for mobility, which brings me back to where I started from, this idea of mobility being an inbuilt aspiration of modern contemporary individuals across the board on a global scale. Now, one thing we may want to discuss is where are we going to? And there is a major political dilemma. This expansion, regardless of the Gini, the expansion of mobility globally and this general aspiration to international, to traveling basically, is pernicious for the environment. We know that 16% of the carbon footprint on this planet is due to transportation. Can we afford the further expansion of this carbon footprint? Probably not. At the same time, should we curb or frustrate the aspiration of people like my Cuban waiter who never traveled in his life to go out of the bubble and their island and be equal to a person like you and me who has the opportunity to travel? So this is a real political dilemma. Research-wise, the next step is to look at the stratification of mobility within countries at the individual level. These are aggregate country-level data. I've done a little bit of research on France, Germany, and Italy. I published an article last year in Social Indicators Research showing that also in these high-income countries there is a huge stratification depending on income and depending on education. Even more than income, it's education that boosts international mobility. I would love to have data from other countries and play around with it, but that's next chapter. Thank you so much. Very eager to discuss this.